Welcome everybody back to another episode. So today we have a very special roundtable with Dave Maconi. Hey Dave.
What's up, man?
And Brendan DaCruz. Hey Brendan.
What's going on, Abel?
So we promised a few weeks ago on Instagram that we would do this roundtable where we would analyze your pictures and we would react to them, and we would give you a body fat percentage estimation, which we all hate to do. We will explain why in a second. And we will also advise you on whether or not you should cut or bulk. So this is going to be hopefully valuable for everybody. And yeah, guys, are you ready?
I'm all set.
Yeah, so I think maybe we could start this whole thing with a couple of kind of introductory points and disclaimers, because for the sake of making this a little bit more efficient, we don't want to give like 50 billion disclaimers at every picture and at every person. So I think what we should start with is what things we would consider if a client came to us and we had to make the call of whether that person should cut or bulk. Because it's one thing to look at someone's physique and just, okay, you're roughly at this percentage body fat, probably your goal is to be at that percentage body fat. Then you can just, give a one-word answer, cut or bulk. But in reality, people have different contexts and backgrounds and just things that we have to consider. So who wants to start off with this? How about Dave, you go first on this?
Sure, yeah. I was just thinking I'm definitely going to annoy you if I have caveats every single time. But just generally speaking, obviously, we're just looking at pictures here. So big factors would be how long have you been training? What are your goals as far as are you a power lifter? Are you a bodybuilder? Are you competing in the next 6 months? Are you not competing for 3 years? And even just your general age, aside from training age, all of these could dramatically change the answer as to whether we think you should bulk or cut. And that's not even factoring in, health issues potentially. If somebody's 25% body fat and they're a power lifter and they have perfect health, that could be different than somebody who's maybe had a history of hyperlipidemia or something. So a lot of caveats, and we're just going off of these pictures.
Yeah, I would agree. So, for the sake of this discussion, we're kind of going to assume, or at least I'm going to assume, and you guys are free to have different assumptions, but I'm going to assume that the people who submitted these pictures are after what most guys are after. We only have guys in this. So we just a disclaimer, besides all the other disclaimers, I went in order of submissions. So first come, first serve, or what's the saying? So I didn't discriminate, just whoever submitted their pictures first. Those are the ones that are going to get reviewed in this episode. But I'm going to assume that these guys are after the fuck me physique, they want to look good on the beach, they want to have some good muscle size, and where they are at the moment, they're just not sure whether focusing on muscle building or fat loss is the better call. But there are other things to consider. So if someone comes to me and they are slightly fatter than what I think would be the ideal place to start a gaining phase, but they just finished a 6-month long diet where they lost, 50 pounds or something, and they're super burnt out on dieting, I'm not going to say okay, we're going to diet for 2 more months. Or if someone just recently struggled with binge eating super hard, and in that case, maybe I'm going to say, probably the whole cut or bulk question is not even relevant for you. You probably should just live like a normal person for a while and focus on eating habits, getting your relationship with food back in order a bit. So it's not a binary thing at all times. The answer is just a lot more complicated than we would like to think. So that's my piece. Brendan, anything to add there?
Yeah, absolutely. So first and foremost, I agree obviously with a lot of what you guys are saying. From my perspective, I get this question quite often, whether it be through social media or especially with new clientele. Everyone, mostly that comes to me is looking for improvements in body composition, and they want that increase in lean body mass and decrease in body fat. And sometimes we can do both at the same time. So we could get into that later with the recomp type subject. But usually I'm trying to prioritize one thing, because chasing two rabbits, usually, most people aren't going to end up with either. So that's where I'll take a needs analysis type approach. So the first thing I'm looking at is where they're, what I'm seeing visually. So where they're at physically in terms of their muscular development, their body fat, and their health metrics. I take that, especially the latter one, the health, very much into consideration. Like you had said, we're going to assume that these guys are all healthy, but this is a caveat for other people out there that are going to take some of the insight and advice that we put out here and apply it into their own training or their own approach. I'm looking at things like blood glucose. I'm looking at, so as a marker of insulin sensitivity, HbA1c, fasted insulin. I'm looking at, systemic inflammation. I'm looking at, resting heart rate. I'm looking at blood pressure. Those are all determinants because we know that those aren't going to improve if you're in a surplus of calories, because insulin resistance is most highly linked to a surplus of energy, not just of carbohydrates or singularly of a macronutrient like fats. So that's where I'm really going into an approach where if someone comes to me, and even some of them look metabolically healthy from the exterior, they look somewhat lean, they're 15 to 18% body fat, they're in good shape, quote unquote. However, their metabolic markers are out of whack, and that's where we need to prioritize, hey, let's get some fat off, let's get some weight off of you, let's improve these markers, and then we can have a better approach, both in terms of health outcomes as well as actual physique outcomes in doing, a growth phase or a bulk, essentially. I do want to put that out there. I hate the word bulk, so I'll use it for the context of this podcast, but I don't like that. I think there's a lot of negative connotation that comes with that, which includes excessive food intake, which isn't necessary to grow muscle. The other thing that I'm looking at is, and this is something Abel and I had touched on in our last podcast, is really mindset. So I'm looking at where someone's at mentally in terms of not only their wants, goals, and desires, and how realistic those things are. So, as a coach that's worked with hundreds of individuals, I really take things from a pragmatic perspective. This isn't to say that I would tell anyone that they don't have the potential, but if I'm looking at all these variables in terms of how much muscle that they've gained, or, how much time they've spent in the gym, their training age and experience, and they have a very unreasonable goal, that's going to dictate where I direct them or where I think that they should go in terms of, the direction forward. The other thing from a mental capacity that I'm looking at, or a mental standpoint, is the relationship with food. That is huge for me. So I'm constantly digging and asking questions that we're not going to be able to do in this podcast, but I'm constantly asking about diet history, their experience with diets in terms of successes, failures, why those things, underlying root causes as to why they've had issues, either in terms of their success rate or in the maintenance of that fat loss, or in terms of their relationship and their outset and their outlook on food. So I'm looking at, I'm trying to analyze from my perspective, does this person display flexible restraint or rigid restraint? So really I'm trying to delineate what type of relationship does this person have with food, and is going into a diet, even if they're at a higher body fat percentage, is that going to impact them detrimentally from a health or mental health perspective? So those are all things that I'm looking at, and then I'm looking at what they're currently doing. So I'm always, getting an analysis whether it's a food journal or if it's, they count their macros and they send me over their data. Someone could be, at a high body fat percentage, but if they're on fuck all food, we're not going to the dieting phase. You know what I mean? Or if it's in the opposite and, they desire to gain muscle, but their digestion is off. And they've been pushing food and they're still at a low body fat percentage. Say they're in, 12 to 15% range, but their digestion has been blown and they just have that force feed mentality. What I try to get across to them is, listen, maybe we do a reset phase. Maybe we go into a maintenance. Let's address some of these digestive health issues, because you cannot force feed muscle growth. And we know that. And that's why we have studies that even look at the degree of a surplus needed to gain muscle. And really the determinant of growing muscle or bulking, quote unquote, is you need muscle protein synthesis to exceed the level muscle protein breakdown. So the two biggest determinants of actual gaining muscle is your net protein balance as well as a sufficient training stimulus. So oftentimes someone comes to me in that type of scenario, I might just, optimize their training, will gain muscle just by sheer fact of that, but they're at maintenance calories. So there's a lot of things to take into consideration. Obviously that we're not going to be able to go in here, but those are just things I want the audience to think of when they are coming to their own, determination of what they should do.
Yeah. Just for the record, I do even more blood analysis than Brandon. I just didn't want to mention it here. Just kidding. So another thing I wanted to kind of flesh out for the get-go is I don't know how you guys think about this, but one of my least favorite questions to receive from a client is, what would you estimate my body fat percentage to be? And that's because, as like the more you look at physiques, the more you have gone through diets yourself and you reach like very low body fat percentages and you went up and you get a better and better idea about, okay, like what is really, something that is approaching 10% body fat? What is really 15% body fat? Like, okay, what I thought was 15% body fat earlier is more like 20%. Like you start realizing that reaching those low numbers is actually much harder than you think. But people don't have that experience. And so in their head, anything that's approaching 10% body fat is good. Anything that's approaching 15% or more is bad, is fat. And someone might look great. Like if I go to the beach with that person when I'm at my leanest, like legitimately under 10% body fat, the guy might be crushing me. He might get all the looks ahead of me any day. But if I'm actually looking at, okay, how does your lower back look? How does your upper back, your thighs, whatever? Like he might be at 16% body fat. But if I tell him that, like he's going to get discouraged. He might be eager to do a mini cut where we were doing great in our gaining phase. Or he might think that, oh my God, my diet is not going well. So it just puts wrong ideas in their heads completely unnecessarily. So I just hate getting that question, because the actual objective answer that I would have to give is almost almost never as good as they would like. So what is your experience with that, guys? Dave, you can go first again.
Yeah, I mean, I'll still answer. I know we kind of talked about this a little bit off air, but I would rather, like, I agree. People be like, really? I'm like, this percentage? But it's weird to me that there is such an emphasis. Like, we're looking at how you look. And now look, I'm like totally a numbers guy. So the actual percentage is important to me in the sense that when somebody's online, they're claiming I was doing this and I got to, 220 at 10% body fat. It's like, you were probably like 18% body fat, but you thought you were 10 because you had a 2-pack or something, So in that sense, I do think it matters. But like for the individual, like right now, I don't know what body fat percentage I'm at. I look at waistline, I look at calipers, I look at the mirror. But I if somebody asks me, I will give them my honest feedback, but I will just explain to them, like, look, this is what I think you are. But for the reasons I just mentioned, like, that shouldn't determine whether you bulk or cut. If you have abs and I tell you you're 30% body fat, I mean, obviously that's not going to be the case. But if that was what I said, who cares? You look a certain way. Again, not counting like the health ramifications.
Yeah, if Helmut's treble, if someone told him that he's 20% body fat, Helmut's treble, just for those who don't know, like the guy is literally like muscle, bone, and skin, like nothing else on his body. Like body fat just like doesn't exist on him. If someone told him that he's 25% body fat, I don't think his first inclination would be to, oh my God, I have to diet for another 3 months to get to even close to 10% body fat. So, but I agree with you, Dave. Like I also don't deny the truth. I just hate answering them because I've been there. Like I was that guy before, like I looked in the mirror, but that was not enough. Like I wanted that number. I wanted a qualified expert to confirm that I'm really at 10% body fat. Mm-hmm. And if they told me that I'm more like 15, then I was disappointed. And I know that a lot of people think that way because people are just not rational beings, unfortunately. But anyway, Brendan, anything to add there?
Yeah, actually, I take an opposite approach from you guys, to be honest with you. And I think I have to put in the caveat that I work with a lot of advanced individuals. And so when people come to me that are not advanced, oftentimes they'll send me a picture of someone I've worked with, one of the IFBB pros or one of the top level amateurs. And they say, I want to look like this. What do you think my body fat is in comparison? And so the reason that I do not go into body fat percentages is, A, it doesn't matter what that other person is, nor what you are in comparison. And I really don't think that's a healthy mindset to get into because say that person, for instance, one of my pros, Anthony, he's been on the Olympia level stage. He gets down to in the 4 percentiles and that's been through DEXA. And we know that there's inaccuracies with that, but what does it matter of what my eye thinks? And also I always take into consideration that what's lean to me might not be lean to another individual and vice versa. I've been very lean in the past. I've also worked with individuals that have gotten, down to the lower levels of essential body fat. So always in my mind, I may be predisposed to thinking someone's at a higher body fat percentage than they are. So really what I'm going off of is just the overall look of their physique, and I have them focus on that. And for instance, I have a lot of clients that will go get BIAs or DEXA scans or, different body fat analysis, and then they'll send it to me, and sometimes they're hung up on the number. For instance, I just had an IFBB pro who's a female, she's a figure competitor, send me our latest BIA score, and it was 15% body fat. Now mind you, that's very lean for a female, but in her mind, because when she was in prep it was at 12%, that 3% increase was something that she was unhappy with. And what I had to explain is, first of all, those things are inaccurate. A lot of times, if someone's more into the literature and stuff, I'll send them, James Krieger has a great article on the inaccuracies of body fat measurements on Weightology. So I'll send them that article, or Eric Trexler's covered this as well, just so they realize, hey, listen, there are percent ranges. It could be 2 or 3% lower, 2 or 3% higher, or even more so in certain cases. And so it's getting out of that mindset of just being, I'm very analytical, as is Dave. I'm very numbers oriented, but I also try not to let that reflect on my clientele, because I don't need them to major in the minors. It doesn't matter where your body fat is now. It matters the progression we make going forward. So, the only time that I'm really taking into consideration is if someone is in, pushing for a substantial growth phase, and that's where we'll do caliper measurements. And it's not looking at the actual estimation of the calipers in terms of what that body fat percentage yields. It is, what is the increases going week to week and month to month, and are we seeing a substantial amount of fat accumulation in comparison to muscle? And that's really what I'm trying to keep track on.
Right. Okay, so I think that was good for an intro and some disclaimers. I don't think I forgot anything. So yeah, we can just jump into the pictures now. And yeah, so are you guys ready to jump into the actual pictures, or anything
All
to add?
set.
Cool. All right, so we have person number 1. So who wants to start here? Rough body fat percentage estimation and cutorbulk, again, assuming that he's going for the fuck me physique, also known as beach lean physique. I don't know, Brendan, what do you think about this guy?
So just based off an estimation, I'm going to give this person maybe 15 to 16% body fat. But in my opinion, he looks like a newer trainee. Not brand new to the gym or anything, not saying that. Probably 3 to 5 years into his fitness journey. There's certain body parts that I would look to bring up. Pretty good arms. I would work on shoulder development and things of that sort. So I would tell him to bulk. I would say continue putting on, accruing some tissue. I'm not saying to go through an excessive bulk, but something at, a slight surplus above his maintenance calories, and continue the process of gaining muscle. He looks very fresh in terms of muscular development, looks like a young guy. So my whole thing, especially when younger people come to me, is to really maximize those early years of progression when you are most sensitized to gaining muscle. And there is really no rush to get into, we could push the upper echelons of higher body fat percentages in terms of, bulking when we're younger. And we see that in the literature in terms of like collegiate football players. We see that even some of them have insulin resistance and metabolic syndrome. However, it's very reversible in those age demographics. I recently heard Eric Trexler talk about a study on 19-year-old linemen and how their body fat percentage averaged around 22%, but most of these guys were still metabolically healthy, quote unquote. So that's a time period in your life where, hey, keep pushing for the gains. But if this guy was 35, 40 and at the same percent body fat, and he was pushing upwards more and more, I would say, listen, you're probably at close to your maximal, muscular potential. And if they are natural, and maybe you should look at either maintaining or going into a cut.
Yeah. So okay, it's good that it's clear that we won't see eye to eye on all of this, because I would actually tell this guy to get leaner. Not because I think he looks bad or fat or anything like that. It's because I think, first of all, I would probably put his body fat a little bit higher personally. Like his back looks leaner than his front. I think his front looks like the high teens of that of someone with a decent amount of muscle. His back looks a little bit leaner. And I think this is a good place to kind of end a bulk. Not because of P ratios or whatever other crap. It's simply because that's where most people are like, okay, I'm okay with how I look, but I don't want to get much fatter than this. Again, it's keeping in mind what I assume their goals to be. So I think at this point, if they bulk, and during any kind of successful bulk, they will put on some body fat. Like, usually from my experience, like 2 months into that process, they're like, ooh, like, hey, Abel, I was thinking of doing a mini cut just to get some fluff off. Like, I would rather prefer someone to do a long extended gaining phase. And from this point onwards, if they do that for like, 4+ months, like they will just drift further and further away from their end kind of goal physique. So just from a psychological optimality perspective, I would probably tell him to go into a moderate deficit for, 6 to 8 weeks, probably not longer than that. And after that, focus on a gaining phase. So that's my perspective, but you guys feel free to disagree with me. Brandon, do you want to have a comeback to that, or?
No, I do see where you're coming from, but I am taking into consideration both his front and back, and the fact that people distribute body fat much differently than one another. So seeing that his back is leaner, I did take that in consideration with my estimate. That's why I'm saying around 16% body fat. And like I said, it more came down to muscular maturity in my perspective, where this guy could eke out some more progress. And it doesn't have to be like, that's why I really want to put this caveat out there. When we say bulk, like I would never use that term with a client or anything. This would be like a slow gaining phase where you just incrementally added muscle with the goal of hopefully not adding too much excess adipose tissue. So that's where I would say like what I would, quote unquote call, a lean growth phase. So we would keep calories, maybe 1 to 200 or 3 to 400, depending on this guy's body weight. Obviously, we don't have metrics like that. So if they were a lighter individual, if this guy came to me and he was 160 pounds, he'd probably be at 100 to 200 calorie surplus above maintenance. And if he was at, 200 plus pounds, I'd probably go 3 to 400. And I would just push for, steady progress, but it wouldn't be bulk in the sense of like, let's slam some food down and try to get weight up as much as possible. Never am I thinking in the context of weight. I'm thinking of the context of muscular potential. And especially when someone's newer to training, they're more likely to benefit from being in a surplus.
Right, Chose. Okay, Dave, your 2 cents.
Yeah, it actually is interesting that I think we are going to have some different answers. I'm surprised actually because I expected Brandon to be, because you are pretty damn lean year round. I expected you to actually go more towards like the leaner side. Also, Abel, when I opened this, just like looking at the back of this guy's head, I thought like this was you. And I was like, is this like a troll post? But anyway.
Do I look like I have a tattoo?
Well, that's why I was like, okay, clearly not him. So, body fat, I would say 16 to 18%. It's actually, you guys mentioned how his back is leaner, but I wonder how much of that is the shadowing and the lighting, because if you look at his lower back, I mean, there's some noticeable love handles there. So, and like, guy listening, not trying to be a jerk, just noticing. So, to me, I think there is significant fat on the lower back. From the front, some mild abdominal definition there. But yeah, I mean, if you said 16, 17%, I think that's fair. And again, this is where maybe if we do another one, we'll just ask like, how long have you been training? Because that's one of the things like Brandon brought up. Like he thinks this guy is new, which Brandon, I will never send you relaxed photos of me because you will tell me I've been lifting for 2 years. But this guy, I would say, he has like noticeable muscle. I mean, if this is a natural athlete, I mean, I can think of people who have been lifting for a long time who have this level of muscle mass. So I would probably say in this case, I agree more with Abel that like I wouldn't say you can't bulk up past this, but this is about where I'd start saying, okay, maybe another 5 pounds or so, maybe another couple of months slowly going up, but I would be near the end of a gaining phase for this guy and getting ready to cut soon.
All right, let's go to individual number 2 then. So, yeah, I almost threw this in here for shits and giggles. And not really. So I almost threw this in here as just an interesting one because I just really hope that this guy only submitted his pictures because he is looking for a body fat estimation and not because he's actually wondering whether he should cut or bulk. Because if he is worrying about that, then I'm legitimately worried about him. But I mean, I would estimate him to be like 8-9% body fat, something like that. I mean, one could argue leaner is just that he doesn't have a lot of muscle, so it's hard to be at an actual super low body fat without a lot of muscle. But I mean, no question, just not bulk, just eat, dude. Just eat. Like grow, eat, and be happy and healthy and all of those things. What's your input on these guys?
Yeah, I mean, same thoughts. Because it's not like, this body fat, if somebody had a ton of muscle, then yeah, like if they were competing, you say, well, you got to get leaner. But I mean, there's no, I can't even see an argument for anything other than like, dude, just spend the next like year or two gaining.
Yeah. And yeah.
In terms of what he should do going forward, honestly, I would say, right around 9 or 10% body fat, if that. Guy's very, very lean, but obviously, has a lot more muscular potential in him. So I would encourage this guy to, get into a surplus, continue training hard, and really, maximize your muscular development and potential, because you can tell this guy's quite young, very, low body weight and low amount of muscularity. Has a good back shot though. You could see how lean he is really from that back-root double bicep. However, there's so much more potential to keep pushing forward that, cutting, dieting, anything in that context should not be on the table whatsoever for a long period of time for this individual.
Yeah. So all agreement across the board. All right, so next one, I don't think there will be much disagreement on this one either, but I guess one thing I will say about individual number 3 is it's really hard to actually estimate body fat percentages when someone is, first of all, he didn't have a picture from the back, or if the individual you did send one, it didn't come through. So I can only see you from one angle, but it's hard to tell. It's definitely 20% or more, but is it 25? Is it 27? Is it 22? Well, it's really hard to tell. Like once you lose sight of like most of your ab definition, and there is like not a lot of definition around your delts and stuff, it's hard to really pinpoint anything. All I can tell is you definitely want to get leaner, and probably you can go into a relatively hefty deficit at first. But other than that, I would say it's relatively hard to give an exact body fat estimation. I would, if this was a client of mine, I would probably put him at 25 maybe, just to be conservative, just to like not put him in a needlessly big deficit if I happen to get it wrong. But I don't know, what do you guys think? Brendan, you can go first.
Yeah, I'm estimating between 24 and 25% body fat myself. I really would see the only option here would be to go into a fat loss phase. So I would say, start off a little bit more aggressively. Your rate of loss could be, more aggressive in the beginning, 1 to 1.5%, and then slowly, slow it down. But this guy even could have the potential to recomp, to be honest with you, because he has considerable amount of body fat. So going into a deficit, it's not going to be like he's at a deficit of energy, because he has a good amount of body fat on him. So just overall, I would focus on fat loss first. Getting off a good chunk of fat, especially as he has more of like that apple shape where he's, retaining a lot of body fat, sub-Q adiposity right in that midsection, which is a stubborn area for most men, but especially once you get towards, upper echelon of 22% body fat, which is really where we see some more like insulin resistance and some of those metabolic side effects. So I would definitely encourage this person to go into a fat loss phase.
Yeah. Dave, I know you disagree. You think this guy should go into a big bulk, right?
Dude, this guy needs to bulk to the moon. I would say, unless, this guy is like 17, in which case you got a lot of hair for a 17-year-old. But unless you're like in high school and totally new to this and, one of those caveats that we kind of talked about, you need to cut, again, like if you had a weird, like unusual eating disorder or anything like that, sure. But like Brandon said, you could recomp a lot. You could be in a deficit, and as Abel has educated us on, most recomps are going to be in a calorie deficit. And so, not to say this guy has no training experience, but I would imagine that he could certainly be in a noticeable deficit and still gain some muscle on top of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Just one thing I often have to calm clients down about who are like, yeah, I know I should get leaner, but I feel like I'm wasting my time. I want to put on muscle. It's like, dude, like, no, you can absolutely have that recomp phase. Like, you're not even missing out on that much by not going into a surplus from a muscle building perspective. So, all right. So number 4. So Yeah, this guy is probably the most like tricky one out of the ones that we had so far. This is the most interesting one. So body fat estimation from the front, I would say he looks leaner, and he does have faint of ab definition. I can see the separation in his delts, the pecs. From the back, I can see quite a bit of lower back fat, but his upper back is pretty nice and clear. And since he doesn't have a lot of muscle, I would be inclined to, probably put him around that maybe like 15%-ish mark. That would be my guess. And so this is one of those that I think causes the most headaches in terms of like, okay, should I say this person cut or bulk? Because he definitely has a lot of potential still to grow muscle. And it's not like, okay, just go into a deficit and you will recome because you have so much body fat. So it will probably still happen, but not to like a very significant degree like in the previous case. I would probably lean slightly still towards getting leaner at this point. Not because I think he looks bad. It's just because I know, how most guys tend to tick. If he goes into a gaining phase, then, 2 months later, the hey, Abel, can we do a mini cut email is coming soon. I think purely from a body fat perspective, this is roughly a good place to start tapering that bulk down. So I would not start a bulk here in most cases. So that's my take. What do you think, Dave?
I would say because and I agree with the body fat percentage, I would say this is probably a pretty legit like 15% or so. You can see the kind of top of the abs, but I'd say he's maybe a little bit leaner than that first guy. But because he doesn't have a lot of muscle mass, I would say just, it's borderline. You could go either way, but because he has not a lot of muscle mass, I would actually probably go towards a gaining phase. I could see this client, like, because we get this all the time, right? Like somebody comes here and they say, I want abs. That was me when I was really young. They see the little pouch on the belly and they say, I want to get rid of this. I want abs. And probably most people in this situation would want to get leaner. And that would be fine. Like I wouldn't, like there's some things where I just like this probably isn't the best bet. If he really wanted to, I'd say that's a fine move, but my recommendation would be to bulk. It looks like he's pretty new to training. He looks relatively young. So kind of like to the first one that Brandon was talking about, like this is when I would say, like, dude, maximize the potential. You've got a lot of growth left in you. You're not near the point where people are going to like see you in clothes and think you're fat. I would say, put on some significant muscle and then you can cut down.
Yeah. Brendan?
Yeah, I'm actually going to side with Dave on this. If this was an individual that, he sent his pictures in, you could tell he had, more years under his belt in terms of training, an older individual, that's where I could see, all right, you're at 16% body fat, give or take. Let's go into a fat loss phase. Let's get some fat off, and then let's go into a growth phase. However, you could just tell he's got very little muscular development at this point. So that's where I would prioritize that over a fat loss phase. And the reason being is that, often people will come to you, I know you guys know this, they'll ask about the cut or bulk, but they have a desired look. It's not just about being lean, but they want to look muscular as well. And when you have a low amount of muscularity and muscle in general, first of all, oftentimes going into a deficit for some of these individuals, yes, they could recomp, but often, a lot of these guys are just so focused on getting lean that they're losing some, muscle tissue in the process. And then by the time they get down to a lean state, by the time this person gets down to say 10 to 12% body fat and he has abs, he doesn't have anything else but abs. So that's where I would prioritize the building of muscle tissue first, and then, transition into a fat loss phase where then he'll have a better base first and foremost. He'll, you could tell this guy's young and has, limited training experience. So going to a deficit, he's going to have to diet on lower calories just to get lean first and foremost. Whereas if we build up, his intake as well as his muscle mass, he'll be able to diet on more calories and have a better look ultimately. So I'm looking more long-term, especially in some of these newer guys and these younger individuals, because it's not just about getting lean. Once, you've been training for 10, 15 years like all of us, then we get to a point, if we were at this type of body fat percentage, we'd say, all right, let's get lean. But we have the muscular base, and that's where we really have to look at the foundations behind where this guy's coming from and what would be most conducive to an overall best physique, not what's just great in the moment. And I feel like this would be the type of person that he would get lean, we get him down there, and then automatically he'd be like, well, I don't look the way I wanted to. I want him to look like a fitness model or like Abel says, a Gymshark model. And he's not going to be that individual. So I would definitely suggest going into a bulk.
Yeah, and I actually fully expected that you guys would not agree with me on this. And I don't think that any of you are wrong. And I've had clients. So the fact that he's young definitely would change my perspective on this. It's just... So basically when I'm saying that I think he should get leaner first, I really think that for practical reasons, because like really it could only be as short as like 3 weeks. Roughly right now you're at like 15%. Do like a 3-4 week, like little bit of a cleanup phase, get down to the point where that lower back fat just goes away a little bit more, your abs are coming out a little bit more nicely, and then you feel better about like the first 3-4 months of your gaining phase. The fact that he's young definitely changes things, so I will agree with that 100%. And but just as much as I'm making a case for getting leaner, I could make probably just as good of a case for going to a surplus. Don't make it a big one, be in a 150, 200 calorie surplus. Just gain slowly. You don't have to pile up a whole bunch of fat, and you will do well. It's just maybe my perspective is colored a little bit just by interacting with more and more people and seeing how people tend to take and what tends to happen in the long term during the gaining phase. But yeah, so you guys gave different responses, but I don't disagree with you at all on a fundamental level. So just some clarification. But anyways, let's jump on to person number 5. So, yeah, Dave, wanna give an intro on this one?
So first, I'd comment on generally good structure, like just from the back, pretty like wide shoulders relative to a tiny waist, and not that that's gonna change necessarily the answers, but I will say that if somebody is basing what they want to do on how they look, and then this applies to men and women, there are definitely certain structures that will allow you to look better or unfortunately worse, at a given body fat. Like this guy, or like, we all know Paul Canoe, his waist is so small that he could honestly probably be 20% body fat and still look pretty damn good. Whereas other people with like naturally wider waist or narrow shoulders at the same body fat, they can look worse. So with that said, he's relatively lean, very little like low back fat. I don't see like any love handles. I'd probably say 12-ish%. He's probably only 5 to 7 pounds away from getting some noticeable ab definition. And this is where, body fat distribution is a big factor, because this guy is clearly, in my opinion, leaner than the first guy. But if you were to just screenshot his abs and compare them to the ab or like the midsection of the first guy, you might say it's pretty similar. But like I said, this guy has like no love handles or low back fat at all. So I'd say probably 11 to 12. And because of that and his great structure, I would say to bulk up in this case. It looks like he's got, especially from the back shot, he's definitely got some muscle on him. But I highly doubt he's near his potential, so I'd say to keep going up.
I'm actually surprised that you put him that low. So I agree that he has a really good structure, but like the thing is that from the back, I would say he looks around 12%, 11, 12. From the front, I would say he looks more like 18 to me,
Wow.
Like I think that body fat distribution plays a big role, no doubt, but I think that when someone is approaching like a legitimate like 12% body fat or so, like even if you have pretty crap body fat distribution, like your lower ab area won't be as soft as it is for him, and the outline of your abs would be out a little bit more clearly. So I would say if I average those two things out, and of course you only see his upper body, so his legs might be fat as fuck or they might be shredded. We don't know that. But if I average out the back look and the front look, I would say, 12 is one, or 11 is one, 18 is the other. The average is roughly like 15, 16. Like that's where I would put it, but maybe I'm being overly harsh. I don't know.
Well, if I
Brendan?
could also like clarify there, I do think those points make sense. I maybe am even a little deceived by like the narrow waist, because that is definitely something like I will focus on. So in the front shot, if his pants were pulled up a little higher, like right like at the line, I might think he was even leaner, because I would just see it flat. Because they're pulled down, and obviously there's a tan line difference, but you can see, not like what I would call a gut, but you can see that it goes over a little bit. So yeah, I mean, if I just was looking at the front, you're right. I probably would say, like, I don't think I'd say 18%, but I'd say maybe closer to like 15%. But just the fact that he has like no love handles at all, and also, even if I just look like upper body, then I might like chest wise and shoulders, then maybe I'd go more towards like 17, 18. So this guy's distribution is definitely interesting. I still wouldn't go up towards 18, but maybe I would say closer to like, 13-ish.
17? Can we call it that? Just kidding. Brendan, what do you think?
Abel, I think you robbed my answer, my friend. I'm right there with you. So yes, from the back, I do agree with Dave. First of all, he's got a great structure, great width. You could tell that he's got a great foundation to build on. So really good width, good shoulder capping, a good V taper, especially. His waist comes in fairly tight. However, it's just that front that it's, if you looked, like you guys said, if you looked from the front, it'd be deceivingly higher in body fat. If you looked from the back, he'd look deceivingly leaner. But just to the fact that I do work with a lot of individuals that do have that type of tapered physique, I noticed that they're able to maintain a higher level of body fat, yet appear leaner. So a perfect example for people out there would be like Jeremy Buendia, who was the men's physique Mr. Olympia champ. I've had Jeremy come out to events. I flew him out to an event back in 2017. He had just come off a surgery. He hadn't been training. However, his body fat was higher. He had only been training like 4 weeks post-surgery. And it was probably in like that 17 to 18% body fat range. Like he had let himself go. He was uncomfortable, but he did strip down. And he has such a narrow waist and such a taper, and just the flow of his physique, that you would never estimate him to be that high in body fat percentage, because he's able to flow so well. And another example, like Dave pointed out, is Paul. Paul has put on an incredible amount of tissue. And I was actually just speaking to his coach, who's a friend of mine, Dave. And, Paul's deceivingly lean. When he's, accruing tissue, even if he's gaining fat in the process, he's never at, this high of a body fat percentage. But even if he did get up there, I guarantee that he'd be deceivingly lean. So that's where I'm seeing it in here. And I would estimate him, off the bat, when I first looked at this, before either of you said anything, I said 15% body fat, just based off an average of both the front and back. And I would be very interested, and this is actually something Abel hit on, was on his legs, because there are people that have, different fat patternings, as we very well know, but often with men, we think that it's generally in the low stomach and the low back. So this individual only has one of the two. He's got the low stubborn, abdominal fat. However, his low back is pretty tight. I think that's more of a matter of how his structure is, so it looks tighter than it is. If you look, in terms of his V taper, he's fairly wide, but it does come out a little bit. So there is some adiposity, but just due to the fact that all the dimensions of his actual back and his taper, it makes it look leaner than he actually is, and like he has less lower back fat than he actually does. So I would estimate him right around 15% body fat. I would say this, this individual could honestly go either way, but I would probably go into a cut, just try to get that definition a little bit greater. I think, especially if he even lost 3 to 4% body fat, which is not going into the extremes of low body fat percentage, he would look incredible, especially from the back. So I would go with the cut.
All right. So let's go to individual number 6. We might have to cap this whole thing out at 10 individuals, because I thought that we will have the intro, and after that it's just going to be like super quick. But no, it's actually a lot more interesting than I originally anticipated. So I think if the listeners and viewers are, well, probably viewers, are enjoying this as much as I am, then this is going to do well. So next individual, so I don't know if he's an older individual or just the beard is more impressive than I'm used to seeing. But this one is very interesting, because if you look at his back, then this person is very lean, like 10% body fat or 9 or even 8, like I can pretty much see all the details on his back, like Christmas tree, yeah, it's definitely there. So like, holy shit, like you're approaching the shredded territory. From the front, he doesn't look as lean, but that's mainly because he has loose skin. So it's one of those kind of deceiving things. I would say from the front, the loose skin kind of blurs the judgment a tiny bit, but definitely not cut. If I average out the front and the back, honestly, I cannot even do that properly because the loose skin just makes things trickier. But the shoulders are lean, the pecs are lean, and the abs are lean too. It's just that damn loose skin is making it more difficult to judge. So I will call like 10% body fat on the whole thing. So definitely the bulk category for me. I don't know, Dave, what do you think about this one?
Yeah, so obviously this guy is older than some of the other ones we've looked at, and you mentioned the loose skin. Also, it seems to be that as you get older, your midsection just kind of grows. And not that he has like a really wide midsection, but he has, more narrow shoulders and a bit of a wider midsection. So even though I think we would all agree that this guy is leaner than the last person, from the front, like I said, you see like narrower shoulders and wider waist. So it's just a different look. Excuse me, sorry. I would also say probably about 10% body fat. And yeah, if this guy is still trying to improve, I would say, other than if he had a photo shoot or something that he was trying to get even leaning for, I'd say there's no reason this guy can't bulk up.
Yeah, definitely the just that wider pelvis definitely makes things less favorable for some people. Yeah, because like it's not that he's carrying a lot of fat there at all. It's just that it's just wider. Like the hip bone is wider out, like almost in the same line as his shoulders. So it just makes someone look fatter, which is kind of an unfortunate thing. So kind of the best thing you can do is just try to get your side delts as huge as possible and get lean. But he already has the leanness part down. So yeah, I guess he can work on his delts more. But anyway, Brendan, what do you think?
Yeah, just looking over this guy, you could definitely tell that he's very lean, especially from the back, and some of his front. It's more so a conditioning. His conditioning looks skewed just due to the loose skin and some of the bottom lower ab fat that he has, but it's mostly loose skin, and I think that makes from the front him to look deceptively not as lean as he actually is, whereas from the back you could tell he's noticeably lean and defined and well developed. And you could also tell, I've worked with a lot of individuals over the years that have lost between 60, 80, even upwards. I had one guy that lost up 100 pounds, and this is a very similar thing that you see a pattern where they get lean from certain aspects, but they do have those trouble areas, and it's generally the first fat that came on was is the last fat, or the fat that's easiest to come on. That stubborn area, the low back or low stomach or low back fat is generally the last to come off, and this person would probably have to push to like the lower extremes of body fat just to get that even a little bit tighter, and we wouldn't be able to guarantee that he obviously he's not going to be able to remove that loose skin without surgery. So I would definitely suggest let's go into a growth phase. Let's push for some more muscle. You can tell this guy's probably been dieting for an extended period of time, probably has lost a significant amount of weight, especially from the loose skin and things of that sort, that he was probably a much heavier individual. So yeah, this is also another thing that I would always take into consideration, because I often have guys that are like this come to me and they've been in extended dieting phases and they're almost like living life in a diet. And this is where the mental component comes in. Like, you look great, realize that. Also, don't compare yourself to anyone else. Realize that your 10% body fat is not a 25-year-old's 10% body fat. And we always have to take that in consideration, because we see a lot of memes or figures out on the internet and on social media where, we have all these depicted pictures where this is 6% and this is 8% and this is 10%. We don't know that. It's how someone displays their body fat percentage. And so that's something that I kind of throw out the window. And this person is definitely in a very lean state. He's got good conditioning. He could use some added tissue, especially in those delts. Like you said, Abel, I would also prioritize chest development, just so he brings up his front to match the back, because his back is quite muscular and it's defined, and he has a really well conditioned back. So he could look to add some tissue on to just overall improve the look of his physique, so that next time he diets down, it's substantially different.
Yeah. all agreements. And luckily, you can buy our new delt specialization program, which you can find at deltblast. Okay, whatever, not funny. So, number 7, which used to be my favorite number, actually. So, this individual, I would say, he pretty much has the fuck me physique already. Although I'm not familiar with cat physiology, unfortunately, so I cannot estimate his body fat. But Dave, want to go first on this one?
This looks like, you guys know Joey Zatmary?
Yeah.
Between the hair and tattoos, this looks like it would have been him like 100 pounds ago.
Yeah, actually, true.
So body fat. So this probably is closer to what I would say is 12% or so, compared to like that other guy said with it. Like from the back, their body fat probably isn't that different, or it doesn't look that different. You can see more definition in this guy for sure. Good waist, good taper, but from the front, you can see like the more clear definition. I would say if I was just looking at back, I would say again 11 to 12. Just looking at the front, I would say 13 to 14. Again, no love handles at all. Almost no little like bump at like the bottom where the waist kind of meets. So there's good pec definition. So yeah, I would say probably in that like 12-ish range. And as far as what to do, he's got some muscle on him, but he's not overly muscled. I would say he's probably a year to a couple of years into training maybe. And I would say to bulk up.
Yeah, I think so the difference between, so if we put this picture side by side with the one that we didn't quite agree on the body fat estimation on, so that was person number 5, so I will just put both on the screen. Like if you look at them from the back, like the V taper is similarly good in both cases. I think that this person has more definition on his back and probably would be more visible if the picture was better quality. So I think that from the back, he looks like a legit 10% body fat. From the front, the absolute highest I would put him is like 13, but I would say he looks kind of like a legit 12% body fat even from the front. Like the separation between the abs and the rectus abdominis and the obliques is there. Not like no love handles at all. Shoulders are lean. So I would say this is like a pretty legit, like 12% body fat, maybe, 12. I will call 12. So no question that I would tell this person to bulk. It's just I'm thinking about like what I would use to estimate his like starting macros and things like that based on body fat. So maybe 12. I don't know. Brendan, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm going to go right in that 12% body fat perspective. I would like to see, this guy has a great, foundation and structure. I would have liked to see, obviously we weren't doing this and we didn't request this, but like a flexing shot from the front, because I feel like this person, his shot really came to life in terms of the back shot with his muscular development. So I feel like, had he flexed in the front, I think he would have been deceivingly lean. We would have probably estimated him towards more so that 10% body fat range. But I would say on average 12%. And I would definitely suggest for this person to put on muscle, go into a bulk phase, get yourself in a surplus. And I'm sure with this type of foundation, especially with his development from the back, that his front shot could come up substantially. He's got a great foundation first and foremost, and could probably, gain a ton of muscle without too much adipose tissue accumulation. So this would be a great look, 10, 15 pounds heavier.
Yeah, I specifically asked for relaxed pictures, so that's my fault, Brendan. And the reason why I asked for that is because when someone has a decent amount of muscle and like some nicely developed front delts and arms, front flexed pictures can really skew your perception. And I myself am actually a perfect example of that. So if I pull like a front double bicep pose or a front most muscular pose, like a lot of people might say that I don't look any significantly fatter or leaner when I have like a 10 kilogram, like 22 pound difference in how much fat I'm carrying. Like literally like my abs and chest and whatever will start looking pretty decent at like, 20% body fat. But when you see a relaxed pose, then, well, yeah, there you can really see the difference. So I think poses reveal a lot more from the front. So it's kind of my fault, but yeah, it would be interesting to see him flexing. Number 8. So yeah, I mean, I would say that this guy is probably, I would also put him in the 10 to 12 range, probably closer to 10. Maybe I would use like either 10 or 11% as for my estimation for his setup. So yeah, back very lean, not quite as much definition as, for example, that older individual that we saw, but still like details on the lower back, upper back as well. And from the front, no love handles, ab definition is out nicely, lean shoulders, lean chest. So yeah, maybe I will call a classic 10% on this one. Brendan, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm going to go right with 10%. And I think I also want to make a note that I think one of the reasons, and this could be that he's genuinely not as lean as the individual that we saw, the older gentleman from the back. But also, I don't know about you guys. Have you ever tried to take a back double by with a camera phone? Because that is a skill in and of itself.
Yeah.
It is extremely hard to not only flex the arm that isn't holding the camera, but especially the one that's actually taking the pictures. So kudos to this guy, because that's something. I have one client that does that, and it's funny. I prepped him for a show, and when we were out at the contest in Atlanta, I was like, "Listen, bro, you got to teach me how to do this because I've been trying and I can't get it. My back looks like half of my back doesn't train, and the other lat is huge. So I think that's a little bit deceptive. But this individual is definitely lean, but 100% needs to go into a bulk. You could just tell the level of muscular development is pretty limited, especially from the front. His back looks good, looks developed. He's got a good V taper. However, from the front, he's obviously needs to focus more on, especially his arms, his shoulders, get more of that taper from the front so that it matches from the back. And it's funny. We've gotten a couple guys that their backs are significantly better than their front shots. And yes, that could be due to a combination of them not flexing fully in the front, but also some of them, their muscularity in the back is substantially better and more developed, and that's a great thing, because we often see, especially in like the gym bro culture, quote unquote, that most guys, their fronts are great, they have good delts, overdeveloped chests, they're the guys that do chest and arms every day, but their backs are severely lacking, and we see that in the posterior chain, we see that in the hamstrings. Obviously, we're not analyzing people's legs in this analysis, but yeah, it's good to see some good backs, man, because that, from a structural perspective, from a physique perspective, you don't want to just be like this straight up and down type of physique where you got good chest and arms, like I'm from Jersey, so a Jersey gym bro, but you got nothing going on from the back and nothing else. So definitely bulk for this guy, 10% body fat, and just add some more tissue.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the difficulty of taking back shots with your phone in your hand. You should see me in front of my mirror trying to take a picture of my flexed rear delts. Like, if you want to see true comedy, you should see that scene.
I think we're going to need a YouTube video, Abel.
Say that again?
I said I think we're going to need a YouTube tutorial on how to take back shots by abel.csabai.
No, but for real though. Anyway, Dave, any input on this?
Well, I noticed this guy, he's not, because I've tried to do this back shot too, and I'm noticing he's not holding like the button to take the picture. So I guess he used a timer, which I don't know why I didn't even think about that, but that could, maybe I'll try that out. It sounds like it could make it slightly easier than trying to like view yourself and do it. So again, props to this guy.
But I think he's pressing the side button on his phone.
Oh, so this is like an old school one then. Or can you do that with the no? Honestly, I'm like so technologically not savvy, but yeah, maybe.
Yeah, maybe it's an older phone. Yeah, it's hard to tell.
My side thing just turns it off, but I don't know, man. Anyway, so yeah, I would agree. Good back development. It's one of those things where it's like, yeah, when somebody's really lean, they don't have to have that much muscle to look good. Like, just looking at the back, it looks pretty good. From the front, yeah, relatively thin there. This is one, along with the, what was it, like number 2, I think, where when you send it in, like you said, like, I hope you're just doing this to get a body fat estimation and not because you're actually questioning whether you should bulk or cut. Because, like, you're combining not a lot of muscle with very low body fat. I mean, this isn't as extreme as that other guy, but yeah, no question, definitely bulk up. Congrats on getting that lean and having some well-rounded development in the back, like Brandon was talking about. But definitely should be bulking up at this point.
Yeah, it's actually also a good example of someone who doesn't have a lot of muscle, but actually, like when I first looked at him, my first thought was not, oh yeah, this guy has to bulk because he doesn't have a lot of muscle. My first thought was just, this guy looks good and lean, and that's mainly because I can see the abs pretty well. Part of that is that he just doesn't have any body hair at that area, so that is playing into it. And he has really good chest. Like the shape of his chest is like classic like armor plate chest, and it would even more so be the case if he had more developed pecs, but he's definitely gifted on the pec area. So I can see my buddy Sotak Andre looking at this and already like cursing the gods. But anywho, so number 9. So I will just say that this guy obviously has to get leaner, but I will also say that this is a good example where someone is screwed on a couple of fronts, and those fronts are being bone structure, body fat distribution, and then, of course, just not being lean. So, like, if I look at this guy from the back, and if I didn't see him at the waist area, I would say that, okay, like, this guy, yeah, probably could get a bit leaner, but whatever, like, maybe high teens in terms of body fat. But then if I scroll lower, then it's like, oh, wow, like you need to get leaner yesterday, if anything, for just health. Like this is not healthy. But then if I look at him from the front, yeah, it's still like he has like a lot of fat around the love handle area. But I also think that he has a wide pelvis, which is just kind of making things worse. So, yeah, and in terms of like what body fat he is, 25 maybe, like he's not that fat. It's not the case. Not that 25 is like super fat, but like he doesn't actually have like a ton of body fat. It's just that he doesn't have a lot of muscle, which like skews things, of course. So I don't even know. I'm just signing off. Dave, what do you think?
Yeah, so I mean the guy didn't post his face, so I'll be pretty honest here, but like this is an example of, frankly, just like when we talk about like bad genetics or like bad structure, and we can throw caveats like, look, I don't know how long this guy has been training. I'm actually scrolling down now and you can actually see his legs. I thought it was just upper body. So obviously there's a genetic response to lifting, right? So if this guy is literally just getting started, it would be hard to say you have overall bad genetics. But what I mean is, like, when we talk about skinny fat, like this is a prime example of that, where somebody doesn't have much muscle at all, yet their body fat is relatively high. And it's great for this podcast because it is a problem that a lot of people run into at the start, right? So, relatively narrow shoulders. I don't know if it, like from the back, I wouldn't say his waist is necessarily wide, if not for the body fat. Like, right, we've talked before, like there's like body fat distribution in the waist, and then there's like wide pelvis. And from the front, though, it does more so appear that he has that. So it's tough. And this is, again, going to the structure. There are going to be people with similar body fats, maybe even similar levels of muscle mass, but they're going to come across much more impressive because of structure. So unfortunately, just long term for this guy, he's just going to have to spend a lot of years putting on muscle. And when he diets down, I think he will look, decent. And I feel comfortable saying this because, like, that's honestly, like, if I should, at some point I'll post like my like early pictures. I do naturally have wider shoulders, which helps me, but definitely a naturally wide waist, definitely fat that goes towards the love handles, so I can kind of sympathize there. Body fat estimation, yeah, I mean, it's got to be around 20 or so to have that degree of like the love handles and the kind of belly going on. Looking at his lower body, obviously not much development, but not really any muscle mass, so it would be hard to really say. And as far as what to do, I don't even know if I just missed that part where you, or if that's like when you signed out, Abel, but yeah. As far as what to do, I feel like this guy, most people in this situation are really going to not like their midsection, and they're going to want to get rid of that primarily. So while Brandon and I agreed earlier on somebody who we said, I think he was like number 3 or 4, where we said he should bulk up first. For this guy, I would probably actually say to cut down. I obviously don't know his age. He looks like maybe he's a little bit older. So I would actually have him cut, because I think when you have that level of body fat and like that waist, you are really going to not enjoy the process of bulking up. Now, maybe for this person, if they're totally new to training, which they could be, I'd say let's just kind of eat at maintenance for a little while, and just recomp as best as possible, or as Abel would, I'm sure, correct me, put you in a small deficit.
Oh my God, my pulse is going.
But still, I would say I would probably lean towards cutting for him. You can definitely still put on some muscle. You know, there's not much of a base there as far as muscle mass, but I would lean towards a deficit. Still focus on getting stronger and all of that, but I don't think this guy would be at all comfortable if you told him to bulk up.
Yeah, just one thing I want to add before I hand it over to Brendan is it's kind of unfortunate that in this, in the submissions that I received, there wasn't anybody that I would truly classify as skinny fat in terms of the type of skinny fat where I can most understand the dilemma, because I don't think... So I think, yeah, you could call this guy skinny fat, but I think that the degree of fatness is enough so that it becomes enough of a pain point, even relative to the lack of muscle, where cutting is not a hard sell. Like the more tricky ones are those where, okay, like the person is actually like skinny. If you look at him in clothes or even without clothes, like maybe 50% of people would say, yeah, this guy is skinny. 50% would say like, yeah, he's kind of soft. This guy, like most people, if they see him with his shirt off, like the first reaction would not be like, oh, like you're so skinny, you have to eat some. So it's, but I would agree that this is kind of a good example of that. But regardless, Brendan, take it away.
Yeah, so I agree with you guys. Unfortunately, this person's in a rock and a hard place in terms of not having a lot of muscle, but at the same time having a good percentage of body fat. So definitely upwards over that 20% body fat, where that's where I would be reeling things back and definitely going into a dieting phase. So my whole thing would be first to get into, he doesn't look really trained, to be honest. So, he's probably newer to training in general. Put him in a slight deficit. He could probably recomp his way through the first, phase and gain some muscle in the process, because he does have a good amount of, first of all, he has a good amount of body fat, which could be used as energy to fuel the process of muscle growth, as long as he's training sufficiently hard and maintaining adequate protein intake. But then from there, just getting a lot leaner so that he has a good starting foundation. And it's not for a P ratio or anything like that, but just to get some of that problem area, because what we generally see is when someone bulks, when they have this type of body fat distribution as well as body fat percentage, despite not having a lot of muscle, they end up adding a lot more fat, or at least that's what I've seen in my experience, is that they continue adding more to fat mass than they do to muscle. So I would definitely prioritize getting leaner, getting a better foundation, putting on some muscle in the process of getting lean. It's not, you don't have to go into this drastic, deficit where you're trying to, cut off, 1% or more per week, where you would compromise, your ability to gain muscle. But this is someone that has a lot of room to develop. So get lean, and then slowly, it's going to take years, but you could definitely develop and transform your physique. It's just going to take years in the trenches, but based on just his muscular development, especially like this is one of the few people that we actually have their leg shots, you can tell he's relatively untrained. So he's at his the upper echelon level of his ability to make progress. So, oftentimes I have newer guys come to me and they're in this, I guess we could call it, quote unquote skinny fat, situation, and they're kind of, discouraged. They don't know what direction to go. And there's a lot of directions to go, first and foremost, but the best one is to get leaner and then build from there. But because they're so sensitized to training, and there's, in the beginning phases of your training is when you make the most gains. This person could probably make gains in deficit for a substantial period of time, as long as he's focusing on adequate nutrition and sufficiently hard training.
All right. So next one, it's kind of unfortunate that this is the last one, because honestly, I'm kind of annoyed because I'm not sure if this person is actually looking for feedback or he's just trying to brag. But honestly, the most interesting thing about this is, so with very muscular guys, which I would call this person, it's always harder to estimate body fat percentages because whatever, like you will always look leaner than what you are. So like at first glance, I would say this guy is about like 12% body fat, like roughly as lean as the one that we saw a couple of pictures ago, the one with the cat face who looked a bit like Joey Satmari. But he's a lot more muscular, so he could actually be like even 14-15% body fat. Is just that he has a shit ton of muscle, so everything just protrudes out more and pushes the fat out more, so it looks tighter. But I would be fine calling this like 12% body fat. If someone says that it's more like 14-15, I would not call them an idiot though. The interesting thing actually is whether he should cut or bulk, only because when someone reaches this level of development, often their priorities change a bit. So, if he just wants the fuck me physique, then just don't do anything. Just stay here. Like you have that. Congratulations. As far as like what you should do like longer term, bulking, it becomes less and less worth it unless this guy is like the biggest freak in the world and he still has a lot of potential in the tank. The diminishing returns are there more and more. Like you gain not that much muscle and you have to bulk for a long time and still put on body fat. So for some of these guys, it might be just more worth it to just stay where you are or try to pull Brandon DaCruz and maintain an even leaner body fat percentage year round, or an SSD able. Like I'm also trying to do that at the moment. So maybe I should pat myself on the back. I don't know. I'm signing off again. Brandon, what do you think about this one?
Yeah, first and foremost, I just want to compliment this guy. He's got an incredible physique, great, muscular base. I mean, especially from the back. I mean, great arm development, great delt development. He's in a position where he could go either way because it's not that his body fat is going up to a level, like you said, 12%. I'd give him 13%, so right around in that range. But it's not like he's anywhere where it'd be uncomfortable for him to push for more muscle. However, if this is a natural trainee, like you said, Abel, he's kind of going up into that. I'm not saying maximum muscular potential, but he's put on a fair amount of tissue unless this person's extremely genetically gifted. So you could tell he's well trained, has been in the trenches a good amount of years, very good development. So that's where I would look to, I would personally cut, and that's because, like you said, we have a predisposition to stay leaner year round. But I would like to see what this guy looks like, down to like an 8% body fat percentage, because often we notice that, and we could, all three of us can say this, that when we're lean, and obviously shirtless, we look a lot more muscular and larger than we are when we are at 12, 13 to 15% body fat. So this person would probably look even more muscular. First and foremost, he'd look just the same size. So he'd be deceptively larger. However, lean, he'd be extremely impressive. So I could see this person even being like a natural bodybuilding competitor. So I'd be interested in hearing if that's the case. But either way, he could go either direction. But I would personally go towards getting lean, or even potentially doing a recomp. If we had that option, I would definitely try to recomp this person and just go into a slight deficit. Try to accumulate some more tissue if possible, but also get leaner in the process.
Oh, geez. A massive sigh of relief, which the listeners couldn't hear here. Like when you said recomp, I thought you were going to say like, I will keep him at maintenance and just go for that recomp. So blood pressure started escalating slowly.
Abel, I don't know if you've seen my most recent post, but a lot of people have commented on that. Yeah. And the fact that a lot of people were confused about the whole recomp phenomenon, and I had to keep reiterating things. It needs to be in a deficit. It doesn't mean, remember, law of thermodynamics goes both ways, but here's the thing. You need to be in a calorie deficit to lose body fat. You do not need to be in a calorie surplus to gain muscle, and that's a big misconception. People think that it goes both ways in terms of, opposite directions. You lower your calorie intake, you lose body fat, and you increase your calorie intake and you gain muscle, and it's not the case. So yeah, anytime anyone asks me about a recomp, it is going into a slight deficit, but that could be 5%. It could be so minuscule that you're still able to get slow fat loss, but still have enough muscle protein accretion, and you have muscle protein synthesis higher than muscle protein breakdown, and you're able to sufficiently fuel hard training that you can accumulate tissue in the process.
Yeah. Actually, technically, if you gain 6 times as much muscle as you're losing in body fat
right.
at any given period of time, you can actually lose body fat in a surplus. So that's just so if you can, put on 6 pounds of muscle for every pound of fat you lose, then I guess you can do it. But anywho, Dave, what do you think?
Yeah, well, unlike you guys, I'm not impressed. This guy did not include his calves in any pictures, so it's a little hard for me to say. But I would probably put him.
Agreed.
I would probably put him at. You know, it's interesting. You said that the more muscular you are, the leaner you look. And I actually made a post about this recently where I remember getting into like an argument with this guy who was really big on T Nation like forever ago, because at this size, I said that that's accurate. But when you start getting into like pro bodybuilder, like IFBB pro territory, I'd actually say that being bigger to the average person can make you look higher body fat because you're just so big.
It's 100%
that people
true.
just see you as a big guy. And also a lot of them have these bloated faces. So, I mean, we've all seen these pro bodybuilders who are like shredded abs, or like, who's the most extreme example of this? The arm wrestler with the Mendelsohn. You know what I'm talking about? Is it Doug Mendelsohn?
Arm wrestler, Leo and longevity, right? Just kidding.
What did you say, Brendan?
Scott Mendelsohn.
Scott Mendelsohn. Yeah. The dude has like shredded quads and abs, and he looks like 40% body fat. And I mean, you know, obviously there's a lot of drug use there and stuff, but it's just pointed out that past a certain size, being bigger can actually make you look higher body fat to the average person with clothes on. But anyway, back to this guy. Yeah, I mean, he obviously looks great. I definitely don't think like sub 10, but yeah, I could see 12 to 14%. Obviously, great structure. Yeah, I would say 12 to 14. And then as far as what to do, I know we can't throw in caveats for everybody, but it's tough because you really could do anything you want here and be great. You could easily justify going up another 10, 20 pounds. You're still probably going to look great. You're going to look thick as a house. Or if you've been lifting for 10, 12 plus years and you're deciding to either not, if you don't want to use drugs and kind of like push things, you could just say, hey, I'm just gonna kind of live this life. You could maintain, or you could say I want to be like truly beach lean, like go like 10% and be like that year round. So basically, I think whatever this guy wants to do, he'll be fine.
Yeah, so that's the conclusion, guys. Once you get lean and jacked, life is just perfect. You can do anything you want. You have ultimate freedom. So that's why you really have to listen to our stuff, sign up for our coaching, like of the coaching of all three of us. Like
At once, yes.
At the same time, preferably. Yeah. So yeah, I'm not going to keep being funny and just to keep prolonging this podcast because Brandon has to jump. So yeah, folks, let's wrap it up here. And let's repeat this in the future. I think this is I thought it would provide a lot of value for people, but I think it will actually provide even more value than I initially realized. So thanks for all of you for doing this. You can say you're welcome. Just kidding. So yeah, just let us know where people can find you and all of that good stuff.
Go for it, Brandon.
All right, guys, you can find me on Instagram or any social medias at Brandon DaCruz _. For any other questions, coaching inquiries, anything like that, you guys can reach me at bdacruzfitness@gmail.com. Abel, thank you so much for having me on, and let's definitely do a series of this because I really like providing some more context and also just guiding people in the right direction. I wish, and I'm sure you guys can say the same thing, especially for the newer guys that are submitting to us. When we first got into this, first of all, there was only forums, so people were just roasting you on the internet, and they weren't giving you any like real applicable advice. And I wish they had forums like this where I could have submitted pictures and gotten some feedback and gotten pushed in a better direction by people with experience.
Awesome. David?
Yeah, so Dave _Maconi on Instagram. YouTube channel is Brains and Gains Podcast. If you want to reach out for coaching or anything, you can find the email on my Instagram, but it's just maconid91@gmail.com. And that's it. Yeah, I thought this was good. I think we definitely want to avoid having people send stuff and sending paragraphs of information about them. But maybe we could just add like number of years training or something like that might be helpful for future ones.